Hello friends, Kathy Brooks here. So we've had some technical difficulties. My tripod broke. So I'm not gonna hold this the whole time because that would be super crazy. So we're gonna do that. Oh, such a great camera angle for everybody. Okay, you guys aren't allowed to say I look fat because I'll be pissed if you do. So there we go. This is me looking smart. Don't I look smart?
Very.
I look smarter, right? I put the glasses on. I am exponentially more intelligent, and I have such a shiny forehead right now. I can hardly stand it. All right. Well, I am here with my dear pal, Eric Cuomo-Jones of Canidae Pet Foods. Canidae Pet Foods, in case you didn't notice behind us. So let's start with a little bit about you. So we've just met. We met at Super Zoo. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how you came to be with Canidae and what brought you to pet food and all that cool stuff.
Okay, so I started working in the retail aspect of the pet food industry many years ago. Did that for several years with a company in Los Angeles, which is where we live. And after a few years of doing that, someone had sent me a message through LinkedIn saying, hey, don't know if you're interested, but there's a manufacturing sales position open in your area. And I said, oh, okay, well, sure, I'll look into that. So that was another company. I looked into that, went through the interview process. And that company was specialized in freeze-dried raw feeding, actually. And so I worked with that company for about 3 years. And pretty much right at the beginning of this year, that company had been going through some changes. So right at the beginning of this year, I saw the posting for this one with Canidae. I'm fairly selective of who I would feel comfortable representing because I'm not going to represent someone that I would not feed their food to my dog. Right. And so that started my career with Canidae at the beginning of this year. So now we're going on, what, about 7 months now?
7 months?
Yeah, about 7 months.
Yeah. So hi, if you're watching, I'm actually going to dial in on our Facebook page here. This is like, we have so many layers of abstraction of technology right now, I can hardly stand it. But we are going to be taking your questions. So if you have questions for me or you have questions for Eric, just make sure that you chime in. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. You guys generally aren't very shy, so that's always good news. So I want to talk a little bit about Canidae as a company and how it came to be also. I was introduced to Canidae about a year, well, I'd heard of Canidae certainly, and about a year and a half ago I started having some challenges with my dear Truman, and the other dogs were all developing some weird skin stuff on the food that they had been eating at the time. And I was at Super Zoo a year ago, so 2017, and I was on my way to meet someone and I got lost in the convention center and turned a corner and ended up at in front of the Canidae reception and started chatting with someone who was standing outside who ended up ultimately being my sales rep, which was funny. But I went in and I got to meet the founders of the company and the farmer, and I just liked what I saw. And so I went and I bought a trial bag. I went to a store and I bought a bag and I tried it with my dogs, and within a week the skin stuff was better. So I was sold right away for my dogs. But talk a little bit about Canidae. The tagline of the company is pet food for pet people, which is cute. But it really is very true. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so yes, like you said, it's pet food made by pet people.
Right. I wasn't reading his shirt, by the way, because it's backwards on the screen. So I'd have to be a lot more adept at reading than I am.
So the owners of the company, John and Scott, they were working together at a store in LA, San Dimas Feed, over 22 years ago. And at that time, they were thinking we can do better than what's available back then. If you know much history about the pet food industry, in the last 22 years, there's been phenomenal leaps and bounds.
Sure.
in the quality of products that are available for all of our pets, cats and dogs. So John and Scott said, hey, let's do something. So they started making essentially what is called the All Life Stages formula. The All Life Stages formula, it's a whole grain product. The most popular one by far is what we call the All Life Stages multi-formula. It has 4 different types of animal protein in there. That one is what essentially launched the company almost 22 years ago. And as the industry began to change and evolve, roughly, let's say about 10 to 12 years ago, grain-free became something that people started asking about, and thus Canidae began to delve into the grain-free market. And now one of the largest categories or lines in our company is, you'll see a few bags of them here, but it's our pure grain-free line. They're limited ingredient diets. Fresh meat is the first ingredient on these diets. And then to where we are today, where we just launched our ancestral and petite freeze-dried raw-coated. Here on the shelves you see the ancestral line. Here is a sample of a bag that I brought, which shows our petite.
There's usually more food in it.
Yeah, I was hungry. It was a long flight.
You got hungry in the car.
Yeah.
Long flight. You got delayed.
Yes, it did get delayed. Yeah. But those are brand new freeze-dried raw-coated kibble. And again, fresh meat is the first ingredient. The ancestral has 6 to 7 regionally sourced meats. So meat is the first few ingredients on the ancestral line. So taking it even a step further with that, and being freeze-dried raw-coated.
So let's talk a little bit about deciphering the ingredient panel on a bag of dog food. One of the things that we talk about in our behavioral classes at Hygiene Club is really, because I'm not a vet, just like to be clear, I'm not a veterinarian, I didn't go to veterinary school, I'm not a vet tech.
Not even with the glasses on.
Now I'm a veterinarian. Call me Dr. Brooks. Do you want to be a veterinarian too? Here you go. Oh look.
Now I'm a veterinarian.
No, we need white jackets.
Oh, okay.
As opposed to straight jackets, which some people might say. Probably a good idea for me. But from my perspective, the behavioral impact, and a dog is what it eats, and they are warm-blooded mammals as we are. They metabolize a little differently than we do. Obviously, they digest and kind of integrate ingredients differently than we do. But at the end of the day, warm-blooded mammal, carnivore scavenger. In a pinch, a dog will do what it needs to do, but primarily carnivorous. And when you look at the ingredient panel on some of these foods, they'll say, I think, what was the brand when Merrick was bought out by that, we won't name the Dark Force company that bought them, but they used to be a food that I recommended all the time. And they relaunched after the company had been bought out, and they relaunched with a label, same great taste, which I'm wondering how the humans knew that. But when you read the ingredient panel, meal, like some byproduct meal, I think was the second ingredient. So let's talk a little bit about things like meal and the difference between meal or byproduct meal, and what all that means.
Okay, so quite simply, avoid byproducts. There are plenty of high-quality foods out there, Canidae included, that use fresh meat and meals. Absolutely not a zero niche byproducts. Byproducts are kind of like what they sound like. They are a byproduct. It's stuff that we would never even conceive of using in any of our products. Even 22 years ago, when John and Scott were starting to develop the food, the byproducts are what they were getting away from, because that just avoid byproducts. Okay.
Now, meal does in and of itself, it just essentially means organs and bone and like kind of the entirety of an animal, except for maybe like coat and fur and.
Not necessarily. There are different grades of meals. Okay. And meals are essentially a concentrated form of a meat protein. It's kind of, look at it kind of like a protein powder for humans, right? It's in a very exact measurement. It's very precise, and it's a way for us to guarantee the analysis of what we're stating on that packaging.
In terms of protein levels and like fruit proteins and all of that sort of stuff.
Yes, exactly. It's a very exacting formula. It's a concentrated meat protein, if you would, and that's what meals are. Within meals, there are various grades, okay? At Canidae, we strive to and do successfully use some of the highest quality ingredients that are available for anybody to use. There are different grades of meal. We use some of the highest grades that are available. There are meals that are used in the pet industry, and I can tell you that many companies that would be considered suspect manufacturing of pet food, they would probably use meals that we would reject. So what we reject, the other ones are using.
Now, I mean, this was one of the things that really drew my attention to the pet food industry was the class action lawsuits that started in the mid-noughts, give or take, where there was, I forget which manufacturer got hit first, but the meal they were using was being sourced from China, and melamine was actually one of the key ingredients. And what was happening is the dogs and cats were dropping dead of renal failure. Like their livers were just getting, and kidneys were just getting shot. And there were many protections that were put into place over the course of the tail end of one administration into the next administration around regulations for the pet food industry. You may not use these things, these ingredients, ethoxyquin, incredibly toxic pesticide that had been used for years as a preservative in pet food. BHA, BHT, look at any box of milk bones, it's still ingredients. You know, again, these preservatives that are used for these products that are in big box stores, they're sitting in warehouses, they're sitting on freight cars, they're sitting in trucks. They have to withstand these great heat and cold differentials, and so they stuff them with chemicals so that the food can last, and as a result, they're killing the pets. Those protections in this most current administration, most of those were wiped out within about 3 or 4 months of the current administration actually getting into office. So now we have to rely on the companies, and we have to rely on the integrity of the companies. Does Canidae work in partnership with other brands that you are simpatico with? You know, is there any sort of association or organization of the ethically run companies? Or do we really just have to do it on a case-by-case basis with each brand? Because if there isn't, there should be.
I would say case-by-case by each brand. The governing body in the United States, the acronym or the abbreviation of which is called AFCO. Most bags have the full name of that acronym available. But AFCO is the governing body that regulates the pet food industry in the United States. Canidae, we have our own manufacturing facility. We make our own products in our own cookery in Texas. Our corporate offices are in Los Angeles. John and Scott are the only ones that own and run the company. There's no investors. There's no one else involved. John and Scott have always strived to exceed expectations, to exceed regulations. And so whenever anything has come up of suspect, you talked about melanine showing up in meals, that was never an issue for Canidae because we were never using meals that would use anything of those ingredients anyway. And that's the way we have been, that's the way we are today, and that's the way we always will be. Always strive beyond the standards to make something even better.
So let's talk a little bit about the most. So we've debunked, kind of deciphered a little bit. So there's meal. You also want to make sure when you get a pet food, so like let's say I get a lamb-based food. First ingredient should be lamb, I would think. Not cornstarch or byproduct meal or
corn gluten
chicken
meal.
Or corn gluten meal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like corn, gluten, and meal, like those three, any one of those individually is bad.
Yeah.
You know, putting them all together.
If I could add one more thing about meals. I mentioned a few minutes ago that there are various grades of meals available out there for the pet industry to use. We and other manufacturers are prohibited by regulations and law to state that we use, and we do in fact use, some of the highest grades meals out there. We are not allowed to put that on our packaging.
Why?
Who would benefit from us being able to say, and other high quality manufacturers being able to say, we use the highest quality meals available in the industry? That hurts other companies that don't use the highest qualities.
Oh. So it's who has the bigger lobbyists.
It's who...
Follow the money. Follow the money.
Believe it or not, we are told, as are other manufacturers, you cannot put on your packaging that you use the highest quality grade meals available, even though we do. So we are being prevented.
Said people suck yet?
We are being prevented from telling the truth.
Well, but you're telling the truth.
I can tell it now, but we can't put it on the packaging.
So, and we'll get to kind of some takeaways, but here's one thing that I'm going to say, and I'll say it multiple times because it's worth hearing and repeating. Don't just buy a bag of dog food. Ask questions. Any store into which you walk to buy products for your pet, the people in that store should be able to tell you about the products that they're selling you. We have a small store here, really mostly because of space. I can think of easily a half dozen other companies' products that I would love to carry here if we had the space for it. But when I had to narrow the field, I can tell you that I met the farmer who works for these guys. I met John and Scott at the recent Super Zoo. And I make a point when and I know there are a number of stores here in Las Vegas and certainly all around the country. If you're going to a higher end pet retail store, the people in that store should be knowledgeable about the products on the shelves. And if they don't have answers for you, you should be able to go to the company website and ask. And it's really important that you do. It's important for your pet's health. Okay, I'm going to get off the soapbox. Now I want to, so we've deciphered the ingredient panel. Let's talk for a second about the latest brouhaha. The grain-free diets are killing dogs. So my dogs have been eating grain-free for a long time. It has not killed them. They have died from other things. So as with anything, there's of course the mass hysteria that hits with it. And I've been having a hard time kind of digging through to find the veracity. I mean, I would imagine that too much of anything in a diet isn't good for a dog. Now, you talked about grain-free and that having been something big for Canidae for a long time. I would imagine that you guys have something to say about that.
So, first of all, the study to which I believe you're referring to is in its infancy at best. Mm-hmm. It's a very small study. There are roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 70-ish, maybe 75 million dogs out there that are part of a family. This study, to my understanding, has roughly 8 to 9 dogs in it. So
I don't think that's I'm not a data specialist, but I'm pretty sure that's not a statistical data set. Okay.
It's in its infancy. They are doing research to
probably
figure
fueled
out.
By Purina.
They're trying to figure
Monsanto.
out why some dogs are getting
sick.
Yeah, well, what they're the one that I read was dilated cardiomyopathy.
Right.
Okay.
Enlarged heart.
Enlarged heart.
Yeah.
And what they're saying right now is that there might be, they don't even know yet, but there might be a link between enlarged heart or
dilated cardiomyopathy.
Dilated cardiomyopathy. Thank you very much.
Maybe
if I put the glasses on.
Dilated cardiomyopathy.
Exactly.
Okay.
See?
There we go.
And so, if what they're saying is that one of the triggers to this could be a lack of taurine.
Okay.
Okay. Taurine is an amino acid of protein. Okay. Taurine is a naturally occurring amino acid in meat.
Okay.
Every single one of our kibbles has meat as the first ingredient.
So it should have ample taurine.
It has plenty of taurine in it. Mm-hmm. Some of our kibbles have multiple meats as the first, second, and third ingredients. So what this study seems to be indicating is that diets that are grain-free, that maybe don't have meat as the first ingredient, but maybe they use a potato or a legume or a pea or something like that as the first ingredient. And there are brands out there where they clearly list, you know, maybe potato and some type of meat. Mm-hmm. That means the potato is the most prominent ingredient in that diet, which means they may not be getting enough meat protein, which would have taurine in it.
Right.
So for us...
What about the whole thing about legumes? They're like, oh, dogs shouldn't eat legumes, it's bad.
You know, everything is in moderation. We have some diets, including these right here, 6 to 7 different species of meat in there. Meat is the really prominent diet. Some of them are upwards of 85% meat content. That's a lot of meat. There's not going to be a taurine deficiency in these. Mm-hmm. So my point being that when you get down that ingredient panel and you're talking about a reputable company, I'm speaking of Canidae, there are other reputable companies out there. Yeah. When they're listing legumes, it is such a minute amount, or so far down the list. Even if it's 3rd or 4th or 5th, the preceding ingredients are so much larger in volume that legumes are just a small part of what's in there. So it's all in moderation. It's just like with us. I have a family example. Mm-hmm. My sister loves garlic, would eat garlic like crazy. I love garlic. And then after a few years of eating garlic like it was candy, her body said, I've had too much. Yeah. She started itching. Oh. And the same thing can happen with dogs. Yeah. And so she cut back on the garlic. After a few months, her body flushed out the toxin, the toxicity level that garlic had created in her body, and now she can eat garlic again, but now in moderation. And that's the key. Everything in moderation. In a reputable pet food manufacturer, you're not going to have to worry about, oh my gosh, there's garlic in there. Right. There's a lot of phenomenal...
There better not be garlic, because garlic's not good for dogs.
Well, in moderation...
Well, not raw garlic. Not raw.
Dogs can have just a tiny bit of garlic. But that said, we don't have it listed on our these limited ingredient diets, but the ingredients are so small that it's not even a concern, because meat is so prominent in our foods.
So I'm not a conspiracy theorist as a rule, but I don't know who commissioned the study, and I would likely lay money on the money behind the study being somebody who has a vested interest in there being more grains in pet foods. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, who would benefit from making that type of statement? That grain-free, the statement was something along the lines of what you just said, which was grain-free foods are
killing dogs. That's the headlines that we've been seeing.
That is so far out of left field that it's ridiculous, right? But if you're talking about the trail, well, we wouldn't benefit from saying that, nor would any other reputable grain-free manufacturer of pet food benefit from saying grain-free foods are killing dogs.
Right.
We're just a small cog in this giant wheel of a multi-billion-dollar industry. We don't have the budgets and the lawyers and the litigation behind us to be able to make these broad statements, right? All you have to do is look at who would benefit from saying grain-free diets, right? Even our grain diets have meat as the first ingredient. Who would benefit from that? The people that would benefit are those that don't have meat as the first ingredient.
Right, or people who grow corn and wheat.
Isn't corn a commodity that drives some of the markets?
This is my veterinarian face. So we talked all about that. Do you guys have any questions? You're being awfully quiet.
I think it's because we're being so thorough that we're answering all of the questions.
I think they're just stunned. You're stunned by the volume of information. So let's talk a little bit about fat dogs. So it's no other way to put it. So we have one lovely pup who has a very fluffy coat. And I went to pick him up the other day. I was like, wow, he's not just fluffy, he's there's a dog under there.
Yes.
The typical domesticated kind of urban living dog has a tendency to be a little portly.
Sure.
When we're talking about feeding, talk a little bit about kind of volume and how volumes might change, because I know that when I was feeding my dogs a different brand of food, a year and a half and some change ago, I was feeding, so I can use Truman as an example. He was, if I read their panel, their guidance panel on the side of the bag, he should have been getting 3 to 3.5 cups of it a day. But when I looked at the panel on Canidae, he was getting not quite half, but darn near close, like slightly more than half of that. How is that possible? And does that mean he's hungry?
Okay, so the way that is possible...
Or was hungry? Oh.
Probably
okay,
not.
I'm going to try not to. I'm
no.
going to try not to cry.
He was not.
Okay. Wasn't starving.
Good. I was honored to be able to have met Truman last month. Beautiful dog. And of course, he lives on in our memories. The reason being is, look at the kcals per cup. Okay. And there's quite a broad range of kcals. For instance, our small breed...
let's use a different bag, because we're going to show you that there's more. But wait.
Our small breed dog food is roughly 525 calories per cup. You're going to be pretty hard pressed to find another manufacturer that has a kibble that is so caloric dense as to have roughly 525 calories per cup. Even our pure grain-free and even our all-life stages are pushing 400 plus calories per cup. There are a lot of dog foods out there that are pushing roughly 300 calories. You mentioned half the amount of food, right? Yeah. So, let's say Truman's weight and size required roughly 500 calories per day. 1 cup of this would be enough to feed Truman. If you were feeding a brand that was only 300 calories per day, or 300 calories per cup, then you would need almost twice as much of that food to equal 1 cup of this food. So not only are you feeding almost twice as much, but guess where all that other mass or ingredients are going when your dog finished digesting it? In the backyard.
It's a lot of poop.
It is a lot of poop.
He did poop less. He pooped less on
So my dog...
And it was good poop. Also. It was good, solid...
Visually, speaking, of course.
It was an easy pickup. It was clean on the finish.
I have 2 dogs that are close to 70 pounds each.
It's a lot of dogs.
Speaking of what goes out of the back end, I feed Canidae grain-free. And I kid you not, their stools, and I know this because I pick it up quite often, 70-pound dog, their stools are not much bigger than, say, my middle finger.
You're not going to hold up your middle finger?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
That's the one between that one and that one. I kid you not, I have seen dogs...
Wait, I think the phone is slipping. Hold on. Here. There we go. Oh, wait, I turned the camera around. Hold on. There we go. Technology. There we go. Oh, much better.
When we go to dog parks or where have you, dog runs, or even out on the street, go for a walk around the block, I have seen dogs half the size of my dogs with poops twice as large. And I know it's because of what they're feeding their dog.
Yeah, well, because the body's not absorbing the things it needs.
That's right. And believe it or not, walking your dog around the block does not constitute exercise for your dog. That's not nearly enough. When you look at an ingredient panel,
so much.
When you look at an ingredient panel, many times they'll say an average dog, and then maybe another column reads puppy, lactating,
and less active.
And less active, right? Okay. So puppies need a lot of calories because, like children, they're growing and they're burning calories just being there. Right? Less active dogs are dogs that most of us own because we work all day. Maybe we take them for a walk around the block before we go to work in the morning. Maybe we take them for a walk around the block when we come home from work in the afternoon. That does not constitute an active dog.
Right.
That constitutes a dog that was able to get a walk around the block because you had time to be able to do it. An active dog is one that goes for a 5-mile jog with you in the morning.
And or goes to daycare.
Or goes to a daycare and is running around exercising all day long.
And getting mental stimulation.
Even if your dog is an outdoor dog in the backyard, what do you think your dog is doing when you're at work?
Laying around.
Laying around.
Yeah.
So most
they sleep
dogs,
like 70%.
They do.
I want to come back as a dog.
So most dogs don't need 1,000 or 1,500 calories.
Right.
500 is more than enough.
Right. So you talk about all stages kind of food. You talk about puppies and their nutritional value, the nutritional value they need in terms of calories to burn. Talk a little bit about the need for dogs at different stages of life and the nutritional needs that they have. Because puppies, for example, you don't want to give them oh, look at the picture of your puppies. Oh, and your little human. Look at that.
Okay, well, she's talking about it.
You guys have to see this. Look.
So that's Sophie, that's Fajoli, and there's our son Massimo.
And there's a tiny human in the middle who is equally cute. I like how he's like kicked back with his bottle. Super cute.
Okay.
So you don't want, especially if you're talking large breed to giant breed, you have to be really careful about protein levels. As a puppy, you don't want to give them too much too soon. You have to meter what they're getting because you don't want them to grow too fast. Small to medium breed dogs, I know it's slightly less of an issue, and you're just not talking. You don't get the ACL issues and the hip issues and the back issues and the dysplasia that you have in some of the larger breed dogs.
Yep.
Doesn't mean that they don't exist and that you shouldn't be mindful of it. But I know especially for some of these like giant breed puppy food is like, it's a thing. Or at least puppy food is a thing. Talk a little bit about, if I'm someone who is, getting a puppy and do I have to get a puppy food? Can I get a really good all stage of life? What should I guide me, Eric?
First and foremost, I would look to the brand, right? Always look for the highest quality brand you can. And I'm not going to go out on a limb when I make this statement, but Canidae is one of the highest quality foods you can get. Mm-hmm. There are other high quality foods as well, but I'm speaking about Canidae.
Well, that's where you work.
Imagine that.
That's his job. I'm going to mention some other brands in a minute,
quality
hopefully
food. A high quality food would suffice. Mm-hmm. Perfectly fine, because we are talking about nutrition. Okay? And proper nutrition is key and paramount in raising your puppy into an adult dog. And so you would just need to modulate how much you're feeding your dog. Puppies, because they're growing so rapidly, you would adjust how much you're feeding them for their breed. Okay.
So for geriatric or older dogs, I know there's also an issue, lower sugar, lower calorie, lower fat. Again, is it really just a question of moderate the amount of food that you're giving the dog?
Yes. There's in this regard, there's not a big difference between humans and dogs. When I was 18, I could eat the entire house. I mean, I would eat 18 tacos and drink a half a cup of milk when I was 18. But I was playing football, I was playing soccer, I was playing baseball. I was quite active, and my metabolism was also very active. As I'm getting older, can you believe it? I'm not eating 18 tacos. Maybe 2 or 3 is all I need. But that's it. So as you get older,
depends on the taco.
Just as the dog, yes it does. Just as the dog gets older, they don't need as much because their metabolism slows down. You can see it in their movement. Rather than getting up and trotting across the backyard or the living room, yeah, you can see them kind of lumbering a little bit, right? Their movements are slower, their movements are smaller. They're not burning as much calories, so you don't need to feed them as much.
I have a really good question.
Maybe if you put on the glasses, it would come
hold
back.
on, let me think. Yeah, no, it's gone.
Okay.
Well, you guys haven't asked us any questions, but I know that you've been listening. So do you have anything that you'd like to add before we take our leave of the fabulous people of the internet?
I would always recommend to any consumer out there, don't be lazy. Take the time to do your research just as you would with your human child, that you would with your fur baby. I would not feed our 2.5-year-old son Massimo fillers and corn, and though pizza is great, I wouldn't feed him that for every meal. I have to be conscious of how we're feeding him, because we are the parents. Just as we are with our dogs, we are the parents. It is our responsibility to make sure we're making the right choices, that we are feeding the dogs and the cats just as our human child correctly. We have to take on that responsibility. Do your research. There are very reputable brands out there. Just as you said, go to pet stores that are knowledgeable in what they're telling you. If you go there and they scatter, and they avoid
or they point you, or here's another one that kills me. Or you go to the store and again, I have a slightly unusual circumstance here in that small inventory, small location, not a lot of storage, so I'm limited in what I can offer, and I don't want it going bad, so we keep kind of a limited stock on hand. But if I go to a Healthy Tales, for example, and they don't push me toward a food. I'm always very leery when I walk into a store and they immediately are steering me to a brand, as opposed to listening to me telling them about my dog or dogs, telling them about our lifestyle, the kind of questions I would want to be asked in the pet store. What kind of dogs do I have? How many? What size? What kind of activity do they do? What kind of lifestyle do they have? Are there any known allergies that have
So
presented?
these are all questions that when you go into a pet store and you say, here's my scenario, what should I feed my dog? If they are a true consultative salesperson, they're listening to your information, and they are recommending maybe not just one, but maybe a couple of different brands that would fit your scenario. Not just, oh, here, use this one. Right? That said, I do have a question for everyone else.
Oh.
Who can tell me what Canidae means? So,
nobody. We've got some people listening. Hold on. Oh, I have somebody. We had a question. Oh, thank you. Hi, Kat. That was so nice. We have a comment that I look fabulous. So nice. The lighting is terrible, but maybe I'll have to sit here more often. Thank you. Very sweet. So do you know what Canidae means? It's not Canada.
No. We have nothing to do with Canada.
And it's all capital letters. Is it an acronym?
It is not. We just love the name that much.
So it means something.
It does.
In what language?
Greek or Latin. Obviously they know.
Hold on. The dogs. I think that's probably going to be Eddie's mom. That's probably Eddie's mom. Do you want me to get the door? Hold on, guys. I'll be right back. Hold on. I'll open the front door. Let's make sure. It's Eddie's mom.
It's Eddie's mom.
Hi, Eddie's mom.
How are you? Are you doing?
Apparently Eddie's mom is here to pick up Eddie.
Yeah, come on in.
Eddie's mom is also known as Eddie's mom. Hi, Eddie's mom.
Hi. How are you?
This is Eric.
Hi, Eric. How are you? I'm Eddie's mom. Hello there. I haven't seen you for so long.
Okay, wait, we have to show everybody who Eddie
Oh,
is.
my
Everybody
goodness.
goes to the people who are watching right now. Would you like your
Yes. I haven't seen him for 6 days, so he.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
so a little
absolutely.
baby.
So, here, hold on. Here. So,
Eddie, did you have a good time with your friends? Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
how cute that
I'm
is.
so happy to see you too. I am.
Look
I'm
at
so
Eddie's
happy to see
tail.
you.
It's
I know.
just 100 miles an hour.
There's
Oh,
Eddie,
good
Eddie,
boy.
Eddie, 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 Eddie.
What a good boy.
Eddie,
yes,
Eddie,
happy
Eddie.
to
Oh, hi.
kiss you.
Awesome. I just made out with that dog. And oops, that's a great crouch shot. Sorry, guys. Hold on.
Well, he loves you guys too.
And this is Zach.
Yeah, I met Zach a couple times now. Yeah. Thanks for taking such good care of you guys.
Oh, and here's his bag.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right. See you soon.
Have an awesome day.
Okay. Let's catch up soon.
Yes. Very soon.
Sorry for the dead air time.
Yeah.
Kathy was helping a customer pick up their doggie after being here for a week.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that.
So one of the things that came up in our conversation earlier, we were talking about K-cows and feeding your dog.
Ooh, was there a question? No.
Remember we talked about you have to feed nearly twice as much of, say, let's say maybe a big giant box brand or a brand that uses byproducts and fillers than you would of Canidae. So you're feeding twice as much. So you've got two different bags of food. You've got a bag of food that's 40 or 50 pounds that you paid $20 for.
Right.
That may seem like a good bargain, right? But if you have to feed twice as much, then really that's like a 25-pound bag because you're having to feed twice as much.
Right.
Okay. Well, also with that big bag, you're having to pick up quite a bit more in the backyard because of what your dog leaves behind. So there's those factors to consider. The other thing to consider is overall health and longevity of your dog. Okay? Just like us, the better you eat, the better you feed, the healthier you will be, and the less visits you will need to take to the doctor or the vet. If I eat candy bars and milkshakes and maybe pizzas or whatever those comfort foods are that we love that may not be quite as healthy as we wish they were, I get to a point in life,
and somebody's going to be picking up more of my poop.
That's right. Later on in life, you're not going to be quite as capable as if you consumed more fresh vegetables, more fruits, more lean cuts of meat. Later on in life is when we see those results. So you may think your 5-year-old dog is fine or your 7-year-old dog is fine, but when they start getting to be 10 years old and you've been feeding that 50-pound bag that you've been spending $20 for, they're going to become quite a bit more lethargic than the one that was eating fresh whole foods. And they're now 12 and 13 and 15 and 18 and still as active as that dog that wasn't feeding quite as well, that's now 10.
Yeah.
Our cats are 17 and 18 years old.
That's awesome.
We had dogs that lived to be 17, 18 years old, no problem. But it comes from feeding high quality foods. Now, every once in a while, someone's going to say, well, I fed blah, 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 and my dog lived to be 18. Well, imagine how much longer they would have lived if you had fed a whole diet.
Sure.
Maybe they would have been 19 or 20.
Right.
Or maybe they would have been more active in those final years rather than barely making it up the stairs.
So in the interest of making sure that we spread a little bit of the love to some of the other brands that are out there, another brand that's great, Signature, is another great pet food. I actually don't carry it here anymore, mostly because I had trouble with the distributor. Go figure. Which is unfortunate because it was a great food that was selling very well, but it was a pain to get it. So I stopped getting it. Pure Vita is another brand that's got a very, very great reputation, and Open Farm is another one that's a little bit newer to the market, only a couple of years old, but comes from a very similar kind of history as Canidae. I think it was a husband and wife, and I think they come out of farming, and so a very similar kind of provenance for the company. You'll notice some bags over here. We were a big Taste of the Wild shop for a lot of years. We've been around 5 years, but for all 5 years that we've been around, and it was a food that I fed dogs over their history. Started noticing some real changes with the dogs and their health over some time. So we've actually switched over. They have a new line that's a limited ingredient line called Prey. So much like Signature or Canidae, where limited ingredient, meaning there's a finite, a small number of ingredients that have to have a certain level of quality to them. So we sold a couple bags of that. I'll be reporting back. And I think that's about it for now. I mean, we could probably talk for the rest of the day, but you guys aren't answering any questions. So...
Well, just in case.
Just in case.
Canidae.
Oh, we didn't say what it means.
It's Greek for canine, or for dogs. It's the dog family.
Ding.
But we do make dog and cat food. How
do the cats feel about that?
So far they haven't phoned in.
That's because they're planning a coup.
But the cat food receives just as much love as the dog food. Basically,
I was going to say something
I
snarky about cats, but then the cat people might come after me, so I don't.
Basically, everything I said about our dog food also applies to the cat food.
That's fantastic. Well, and cats are even more carnivorous.
Well, they're called obligate carnivores,
right?
Meaning that they must eat meat.
Mm-hmm.
One of the key reasons there is, in fact, taurine. Mm-hmm. Cats must have taurine in their diet, and when you have meats, in particular us in our grain-free formulas, we use fresh meat. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of taurine. And fresh meat is just what it sounds like. Mm-hmm. We literally have a finite number of days, just as if you buy meat from the meat department or the butcher department, you have roughly 3 days to use it or freeze it. Mm-hmm. But we don't have any freezers, so when we get it, we have to use it.
Wow, that's great. And you have relationships with all of the
Yes.
So if we want to know the provenance of the lamb or the turkey or the fish or the what have you, that we can get that information.
Well, our fresh lamb comes from Colorado. Our fresh bison comes from Wyoming. Our fresh fish like salmon comes from the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. Our fresh chicken, our fresh duck comes from California.
That's foul.
It is. Fresh meat is only sourced in the United States, so it has to come locally, essentially,
so it's locally
regionally sourced within the United States. Our Texas facility is fairly centrally located, so it doesn't matter where in the United States it comes from, it can get to us fairly quickly.
That's fantastic. Well, Eric, thank you so much. We will do this again. I'm sure you guys are going to have questions, because what you're going to do is you're going to have questions after. And you're like, I should have asked that. I do think we were very thorough, though.
I agree.
I think we were terribly thorough. It's because it's the glasses. I do look much smarter with the glasses on. And let's see.
Oh.
That looks.
Yes.
You look less smart when you put them on upside.
Oh, are they upside down?
They're upside.
That makes my IQ go backwards. Then.
I think it does make your
even
IQ
more so.
Even more so.
Yeah.
That was very, very special. So I want to thank Eric for coming in today, and
thank you for having me.
Absolutely, a pleasure to see you, and we'll do this again. If you guys have any questions, let me know. That's the